ERGs, driving membership engagement and executive support. I am Dumebi Egbuna. I'm one of the co-founders of Chezi, and we are an ERG management solution. So our platform really helps teams to streamline and automate their ERG processes, track and report on ERG progress, as well as easily engage all employees. But this isn't really about our platform. If you want to learn more, I will drop my email in the chat. This is really for the team here, Mariel, Stephanie, and Ashley, to talk about how they are utilizing some tools to help market their ERG efforts. So I will actually pass it over to Mariel, who will be leading today's session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having us on today's session. I'm super excited to be covering this topic. It's just so important. I think that everyone on this line has probably wanted to do a different or better job when it comes to driving their membership, driving engagement and exec support for their ERGs. So we're really excited to dive into it. Quick context for background. I'm the co-founder of Spoken. For those of you who don't know Spoken, it's a really simple video storytelling tool. Basically, ERG leaders and people teams use Spoken to create videos that capture the voices of employees and ERG members. So that can be to celebrate heritage months, to publicize ERG events, to attract new members, or even to get feedback from existing ERG members. The videos have a bit of a TikTok-like vibe. They feel very authentic, and you don't need any editing skills to make them. They come together in just a couple minutes. So if you're interested in learning more about that, at the end of the call, I can tell you how folks in this conversation can use our tool to create a video for free for their ERGs. And in building Spoken, my co-founder Fauzi and I must have held a bit over 100 research interviews with DEI and ERG leaders on some of the challenges they were facing in growing their membership and getting members to really engage. But also in the process of implementing this product at various companies, we've really seen some best practices, and you'll actually hear from two people who are doing those best practices today, Ashley and Stephanie. And so the insights from the conversations today come both from that research, those conversations in terms of what is most important to keep in mind when you're trying to build membership and momentum at your ERGs. The insights also come from my own personal background. Before Spoken, I spent about 10 years in the comms and advocacy space. So it was my job to convince executives at some of the world's biggest companies to care about and put money into training programs for marginalized groups in the Middle East and North Africa. So I will pull some experiences and some insights that I learned in that process for how to influence leaders at your own companies and how to channel their support for your own ERGs. And, my goals for today's session are actually threefold. Number one, I hope you walk away with a strategic way of thinking about how to build membership and engagement at your ERGs. Second, I also hope you walk away with some really specific ideas, like things that you want to try at your ERG. And third, ideally, connections to one or more ERG leaders or folks in the DEI space who you want to reach out to after this session to maybe have a conversation with. So to that end, if you're comfortable doing so, drop your LinkedIn in the chat or share what ERG you represent. And also, please feel free to use this chat very enthusiastically for questions. We're going to be covering a lot of those at the end. So in terms of the agenda for today, we're going to start high level, but we're going to go through that high level stuff pretty fast. So I'm going to do a speed round of how to think like a marketer when you're an ERG leader and how to put a feasible plan in place. Then we're going to get tactical, and Stephanie Hernandez and Ashley Tucker will join us to share some specific suggestions about how to build your membership, how to increase engagement, and how to market to and through your executives. We'll then wrap up with a Q&A, and I'll share a couple of resources. So thinking like a marketer. What does it mean? Why does it matter? Why is this a good time to do it? So the last question is probably the simplest. I mean, it's the end of 2023. We're going into 2024. So if there was one time of year that would be a good chance for you to kind of lift your head up from the day-to-day grind and spend a couple minutes thinking strategically, this would be the right time. And it really makes sense to build that pause into your DI or your DEI and your ERG leadership, because we all know that leading this ERG is probably not your full-time job. And even if you are a DEI manager and it is your full-time job, you are probably extraordinarily stretched. And so taking that pause to think strategically about how to market your ERG will really help you focus your time and your resources on the activities that are highest leverage, the ones that are most likely to help you achieve your goals. And it also is a great moment to take a step back and reflect on how to craft the right message or the right messages for your audiences. And yes, I mean, audiences, plural, you have a lot of audiences, whether or not you necessarily think you do. And I know that when you have really limited bandwidth and a lot of other priorities, it's kind of tempting to just throw communications about your ERG out there into the world and hope that they reach the right people and that they resonate. But if you think about it, employees at your company are in really different places when it comes to their relationship with your ERG. And here I actually think it's really helpful to borrow a concept or a page from our colleagues in the marketing department, because you've probably heard them talk about the customer journey, right? So what would happen if we thought about the ERG member journey? So the first stage of that journey is that there are going to be people who aren't even aware that your ERG exists. Maybe they don't even know what an ERG is, right? And for them, your job is awareness, making sure they know what your ERG is and what it does. Now, the next stage in that journey is acquisition, right? Because there are folks who know what you do, but they haven't taken that step to join. You haven't necessarily convinced them either that it's worth their time or that they'll feel like they belong there. So at this stage, your job is to make sure that you're communicating who this ERG is for and what the benefits are to joining. And once someone takes that step to join is when we start thinking about the onboarding part of this journey. You know, how can we make people feel welcomed right away? How can they get immediate value? Or how can we create an opportunity for them to engage early on? And then as we think about that long-term engagement and retention, we're trying to think about how we can entice them to keep coming back. How can we recognize people that really go above and beyond and are extraordinarily active? And how do we get them to that final stage in the journey, which is advocacy? How can we help them be kind of sponsors or spokespeople for our ERGs? And I know this can feel like a lot. It's a lot of audiences, it's a lot of messages, and it can feel like it takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. And so something that we found most useful to help focus on just the most important feasible stuff is what we actually call a bare bones marketing plan. So you can basically think about this as a tool that helps you pause and ask smart questions that will help you and your ERG co-leaders or your DEI team align on what your marketing goals are, who you want to engage, how to reach them, and the resources that you need and have to make that happen. I'm going to stress here, this is not something that is set in stone. It's something that's going to change, and it's also not something you have to to work away, for hours on. It should be a living document. You can consider it a starting place. And at Spoken, we actually put one of these templates together because we found this questions about it came up a lot. So I'm going to share a lot of information pretty quickly. Don't worry about taking notes if you don't want to. We're going to send out this template after the conversation. So what does a kind of bare bones ERG plan, marketing plan cover? The first step is you really want to think about your goals. This is pretty basic, right? What do you want your ERG to achieve this year? A lot of this will depend on the maturity of your ERG and the resources that you have at your disposal. Goals could look anything like membership numbers, activity rates, volunteer hours. Chezzy has a lot of great resources on how to sort of define and track your goals. So I'd encourage folks to check out their resources. And these goals are going to be tied to objectives, just like they would be for your own professional development and for your own annual goals. The thing I want to focus in on, though, is the next section, which is identifying the most important audiences. These are the groups that you need to reach in order to meet these goals. And you can think about these audiences through a couple of different lenses. The first is through the relationship to your ERG, which is kind of that map that we just went through. So this might include current members, non-members, new members, allies, executive sponsors, members of other ERGs, even members of other departments that you're likely to collaborate with, like communications or onboarding or L&D. You can also think about your audiences through the lens of their role in your company. For example, people who have just been hired, or managers, or executives. And it's likely that some of you may also have audiences outside of your company. Maybe you have community partners or corporate foundations or members of the media. So you'll probably end up having a long list if you write all these down. I always recommend that you highlight just a handful of audiences that are really the most important to helping you reach these goals. And for each of those audiences, you want to think about your messaging. This is really the value proposition for that audience. In other words, why should they care? What would convince them to take the action that you want them to take? And this will likely look pretty different for each of your audiences. You know, a new hire, for example, might want to join your ERG for social reasons. Maybe they want to increase the number of people that they know in the company. Whereas an experienced manager might want to join for professional development opportunities. Or maybe an executive sponsor might want to get on board because they want to kind of build their leadership profile and really show how they're investing in company culture. So jotting down this basic value proposition is really, really helpful, both when you decide to plan events, but also when you publicize the events and activities, because it can keep you coming back to that question of what's in it for me, so that you make sure that you frame your communications about those events and activities in the most compelling way. The next thing that you're going to want to do is think about what channels you have at your disposal, and also what formats do your audiences respond well to. You know, are your managers all together in a Slack channel, and is that really where they go to get their information? Or do your frontline employees do best with SMS? Or, you know, is bathroom signage the most effective way to reach plant-based employees? Do new employees like videos because they like seeing people's faces as they get to know them? These are the types of questions that you want to ask yourself for each of your key audiences. Next, we get a little tactical. And Stephanie and Ashley can also go more into detail in this when we have a conversation on it. But you'll want to think about what campaigns or key events and your meeting schedules look like. I always encourage people here, think about your block out periods. These are the times that you're actually not going to be doing ERG programming because of needs of the business, right? You'll also want to consider what we call your evergreen communications. These are the periodic communications that you'll just send from time to time to keep people engaged between meetings or activities. You know, maybe it's a post on Slack at a regular cadence, or a monthly video roundup, or a member spotlight that happens at a regular interval. And then finally, you'll have, you know, your list of audiences and the messages and the activities that you want to do. You'll want to think about your resources. And I like to split these into two categories. Number one is what you have. Number two is what you need, right? And you can consider both the financial and non-financial resources at your disposal. Because ideally, of course, have a budget for your ERG, but you might also have other things that are resources too. These could be pro bono relationships. They could be partnerships with other ERGs or with community organizations. They could also be things that you get through your executive sponsors, things like relationships or introductions, or even the technical skills of your own ERG members. So pause, right? This can feel like a lot. Again, we're going to send you a template for this, and I'd encourage you to approach this process, if you go through it, kind of with an experimentation mindset, right? This is a tool to help you. And again, none of it needs to be written in stone. But now I also want to get pretty practical, because it's great to be able to think about how to do a high-level plan. But I think it's also really important to be able to walk away inspired and with specific ideas on things that you'd like to try out to build your membership, to build awareness within the company. to increase that engagement and to get buy-in and support from your executives. So to that end, I am delighted to introduce Stephanie Hernandez, who's the Global DEI and B Program Manager at HighSpot, and Ashley Tucker, the DEI Manager at Lamb Weston. They're going to help us sort of tackle some of these big questions. And I actually think that to start off, I'd really love to invite them to just share maybe a minute or two each about your background and also the kind of status or the maturity of ERGs at your company, just to set the stage for context. So Ashley, would you mind going first?
Sure, as I frantically find this unmute button. But hi, my name is Ashley Tucker. I use the she, her pronouns. And, my background, I spent most of my time at tech. I saw somebody in the group just post that they were at Meta before. So was I. I worked on the Instagram product, was there for about 5 years before I moved over to Lamb Weston. Now, some of you are probably like, Lamb Weston, what is that? We process your favorite potatoes mostly. So we are potato processing company, making fries and tots and hash browns for some of your favorite brands like McDonald's and Wendy's, and I could keep going. Chick-fil-A, don't get me started on the waffle fries. So then, at Instagram, I worked in policy and was on a policy programs team, mostly working with organizations, experts, academics to help build products inclusively. And then saw that there was a need for, we called it Black at Instagram, so an Instagram ERG serving our Black and African American team members. We had a larger one at Meta, but that was so big that sometimes it was hard to find that community within our app, within our smaller group. So we organically put together this ERG that then spun the founding of others as well. We had a Latinx group and an APIs group, Asian Pacific Islanders. And so that was my work, kind of grassroots organization. We kind of did that in 2019. We all know what happened in 2020. So then that group really helped the company usher through racial justice crises that were happening at the time. So it was really powerful to be there, having that group help the company and usher the product in the right direction during that time. Now, working in potatoes is a lot different than working in social media when you're talking about the influence of an ERG on the product. But we're still making our way. So right now, we had just launched our ERGs last year. And we were going into our second year of programming when Mario mentioned a time like downtimes where companies, we're currently in a down period where we do not have typical or BRG, we call them business resource groups programming, but we're still keeping people aware through newsletters. So right now it's very light programming and then going into more of the experiential programming next year. It's hard for people to join something that they don't really know what it's about. So now we're going to focus on trying to gather people to have experiences together to learn new things. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. Don't know if I covered the main points, but take that.
That's perfect, Ashley. And again, so folks, for anyone on the line who's got a kind of a blended employee population, you might have both desk and frontline workers. Ashley's a really interesting person to connect with, right? Because she's been in both of those worlds and she's currently navigating both of those worlds. Stephanie, how about you?
Hi, hola everyone. Stephanie Hernandez, she, her, ella, Global DEI and ERG Program Manager at HighSpot. So I love the question of when did you get into DEI? I think if you're any person of color or an underrepresented group, you're DEI has been my entire life. I've always felt like an outsider for me. And so you've navigated imposter syndrome basically your entire life. I mentioned in the chat, I'm from Nebraska. So I was born in El Paso and moved to Nebraska when I was in middle school. So an interesting time to look around and see that no one looks like you. My professional experience is I have 6 years in DI&B and ERG. I started at Zillow, was the first person to start their Hispanic or Latinx ERG, became their first president, did that for 2 years, was super involved. I was still based in Nebraska at that point. So as the only person of color in that office, I kind of took on a lot of the responsibility to also help all of the other ERGs do their programming in that specific office, which really led me to learn about each of the underrepresented communities at Zillow, learn about their barriers, learn about their goals, and really set me up to really know and move into ERG program management when a position opened up in Phoenix. So I'm now based in sunny Phoenix. I actually today work at HighSpot. So if you don't know what HighSpot is, it's a software company that, in my opinion, is the best platform to equip, train, and coach your reps and your sales professionals. I currently oversee 6 ERGs, which is very interesting. Like I mentioned, I was at Zillow. Zillow, we had 8 ERGs that were further along in their ERG maturity. Here at HighSpot, we launched our ERGs a year and a half ago. So we're coming up on our 2 years soon. And it's very interesting. We're getting them up the ground. We're setting a foundation. As you all know, I'm not sure who has a new ERG or like starting. So if you need any guidance or advice, like please reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help. ERGs are truly one of my biggest passions. So I'm super excited to be here to talk about ERGs and growing membership as a president, as a fellow ERG leader. Totally know and bumped into a lot of those questions. And so really excited to share that wisdom.
Awesome. Stephanie, we're so excited to have you. And I'm going to give a special kind of shout out on Stephanie. If any of you have global teams, Stephanie is overseeing teams that are very globally distributed, hybrid and virtual. So she's also dealt with a lot of like that time zone issues and coordination. And of course, actually also has background in this. All right, let's get into some questions, right? Let's think first about growing awareness and membership. Like we said, some people who join your company may have never worked at they may have never worked in a company before. B, they may have never worked in a company with an ERG before. And also they may not know that your company has the specific ERGs that they have. So I'd really love to kind of understand how you approach growing the membership at ERGs in your company. So Stephanie, could you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key to growing the membership or like awareness of ERGs is really integrating ERGs into the employee lifecycle. Here at HighSpot, we talk about ERGs when you're interviewing with us, when you've applied with us. We're doing it during recruiting. We're doing it when we go to Afrotech and SHIP and Alpha conventions where we have those conversations. We're talking about the ERGs. We talk about them during onboarding. So once you're a member, once you're a fellow high spotters, we like to call them, we talk about them during onboarding. So we walk into, hey, these are the groups that you can join. We know that your team is probably, we are a hybrid company. So you might not go into an office and meet other people at the water cooler like old days or at the lunchroom, right? And so ERGs are a great way to learn from one another, meet people outside of your team. And then we also, once you are a member, or like once you're a high spotter, you know kind of what you're doing on your day-to-day, you hear about ERGs probably close to once a month is when we have them speak at our all hands, whether it's talking about upcoming Heritage Awareness History Months, talking a little bit about programming that's coming up, encouraging employees to attend. You're probably hearing about them once a month. So you hear about them in Slack. We talk about them with managers when we have upcoming ERG events that are open to all high spotters. We definitely open the communication to managers. So managers know that these events are coming up. They get questions about like attending events and post-event attendance questions that they could talk with their teams to continue the DEIB learning and that safe environment. So I think it's just really important to highlight them during every single phase, regardless of where the employee is just including them in there. And including the successes. I think this is one of the biggest things too. We just had this week, we had our first ever BOLD, or our Black Organizational Leadership Development ERG Summit, where all of our BOLD members got together and did some learnings. So we're planning on sharing how that went, right? Gathering first accounts of how they felt during those 2 days together, what it was like, the importance of it, how it made them feel, and sharing that with the company so they know that if you identify as part of this community, this is what you get from attending these ERG events and the benefits of them.
I love how you thought about documenting that value proposition, like here are the benefits, and also just the ability to capture that right after an event when everything is still fresh. Ashley, what about you? How have you approached this?
I was say no notes. Stephanie just wrote the book there. That's fantastic. But yeah, this has really hit them early and hit them often. So being able to we start really on onboarding. So within that onboarding discussion and orientation, I come in or others will come and talk about just our DI initiatives overall within that. Our BRGs as well, and having a QR code for people to sign up. We add them to a DL. Those folks within most have like a welcome letter, like we'll get folks that have joined over a period of time, and then we'll send like, hey, you're a part of this group, this is what that means. We are heavy on the allies here on being able to join, because we, working with potatoes in potato land, you could be not surprised that we don't have the highest numbers of diversity here. So we're one, trying to educate people on diverse populations, just really educate them on what DI means and why it's important for the business. And then as well, like having these groups of folks to learn more about communities that they may not identify as, but want to learn more about. So it's like a parallel pathing in kind of education and awareness and promotion. And then add on top of that, we just globalized our business even more by acquiring our business out in EMEA. So in the same time, we're trying to be more inclusive and learn about our international colleagues, as well as, so it's like, we went from 0 to 100 when it comes to needs for DI. So we're right now trying to organize, add training to just teach on some of the terms on inclusion, what inclusion means. And then that will also be another gateway for us to have people engage in inclusion by joining these BRGs and learning more about these groups. So really we're on onboarding, on communications. We got a lot of newsletters that come out. So, and newsletters from leaders. So like, not only are we in general newsletters, but the newsletters that come out from the chief HR officer or the COO or things to get that placement in places where people care about. So having that comms partnership is going to be key when learning those channels that we're talking about to get that awareness of the group. Even still to this day, some people are like, okay, I know that they're out there, but I don't really know what it is. So that's why we're wanting to do more experiential things to get people some interaction to the group and to the learning.
Ashley, those are such great points, because it feels like something that came up for both of you is close partnership with other teams. So the comms team in particular, I come from a comms background. I know they share similar goals that you do. And so they want to collaborate with you most likely. The second thing I thought was really interesting to kind of double down on, Ashley, with what you said is, particularly in a context where you're really starting from the basics. But number one, like communicating the importance of communicating about it. Like this is a thing we talk about at our company. And number two, helping people understand language to talk about it in. And I think especially in a global context where terms like diversity, terms like inclusion, it can mean different things, right? Like we often have a very American-centric way of thinking about DE&I. Most of us are in the United States. That makes sense. It looks really different in other places. And so giving people kind of frameworks, giving people language that they can use to apply to their own sort of national circumstances as well can be really, really useful. Before we move on to the next topic, is there anything that, any other initiatives, one or two things that either of you want to mention?
I would say from an easy way to bring awareness to ERGs, especially if you're starting your ERGs, is intersectional events. I think we can all agree, like, we're really busy, it's end of year. I think one of the biggest things is people do tend to kind of, if they do join ERGs, they join the ERG that they feel most comfortable joining. But oftentimes I think what really helps is when you have an intersectional event, even especially if you have that like Ashley mentioned, like you're leaning on allies to kind of join those ERGs. If you have intersectional events, I think it's a way to increase either membership if they identify as those to ERGs that are planning the event, or is an ally of another group. And so, for example, say that, the Hispanic or the Latinx ERG is planning an intersectional event with the Black ERG. And so getting together and they plan an event as maybe you just identify as Hispanic, but then it kind of puts you in a position where it's like, oh, I just had an event or some programming with these people, and I really want to join their cause. Like, it seems like they have some similar barriers that we can relate to, and so planning intersectional events is a huge way also to increase that awareness of ERGs within internally, and it lessens the workload, which I think is really helpful right now.
Yeah.
Come on now, you already know.
Go ahead, Ashley.
And then I'll just piggyback on that, because we are doing an intersectional event that's also tied to a cause that the company really cares about. So again, through the partnership with our comms team, they're like, hey, we used to really run this big food drive that people loved, and then we haven't done it in the past couple of years. Maybe it's an opportunity to partner up with the BRGs to like lead it, to be the face of this thing that people really liked, to then even have the gateway to learn more about them. So now we're starting the planning on running our company-wide food drive that the BRGs are leading. They'll be like location champions to help spur that on. So it's like the BRGs that are helping the company fight hunger, partner with community. And so it's like, okay, this is a great way. So it doesn't feel like a company mandated thing, but a community, driven event. So that's another way to say, hey, is there something that like our company really cares about that we can then help spur on or be the face of, to help people know about the BRG and then join. For us, like between joining the BRG and being a member and not being a member, the experiences aren't too different, because that there's a lot of allies within the group. Like, there's not like a separate group for identifying members and then for non. We have that at Instagram. It's all mixed in here. And so really just joining the group means that you hear about things first. And maybe there are some programming that have limited seats that you're able to join in than others, but mainly we're focused on engagement. Like, how do we have things go on that everybody can like participate in? So tying up to big things that are important to the company, or what I would say.
That's a great point. So just to kind of recap some of what we've heard, in terms of the main points here, right? Integrating ERG marketing into every single stage of that employee lifecycle, getting them during the recruiting process, during onboarding, post-hire, using existing company events to share updates, taking that little section of the all hands, taking department meetings, little sections of them, and really using those as opportunities to share success stories and testimonials. We see a lot of our own customers doing this with the short videos. There are many other ways to do this as well. I love the ideas around using intersectional events to cross promote, and also to piggyback off of the efforts of your sort of other ERG leaders in the company, so you're not duplicating efforts. And then finally, really partnering with people and comms, because so many of those teams within people and comms will have similar goals to you, and they want you to succeed in these events. So moving on, all right, we've gotten some awareness, we've got membership. How do we think about really getting people to engage in our events and to engage in our activities? How do we get people to show up when they are very, very busy, or they might have constraints on their schedule? So Ashley, could you kick us off here just in terms of how you think about increasing engagement and participation in your own ERGs?
Yeah, I'll give one example here, and I know that people are busy, but people have to do what? Eat. Okay, so people, we are a food company, so we've seen that really the lunch and learn kind of model has really helped. So having times where we've held like a lunch for AAPI Heritage Month, one to eat foods that they may not have eaten before, learn about the community, have a little bit of trivia, and then a lunch where people can get together and talk about why this Heritage Month is really important. So things that kind of revolve around food. Now we know for time zone that lunch times can be different for different people. So being able to have events that are on a few different times really helps. I know that at our plants, if we do any celebrations that are related around food, we usually run it in 4 shifts, because they have different lunch times for each shift. So it's like, okay, we did this for our Juneteenth programming, where we had a local organization come into one of our plans, talk about the importance of Juneteenth, a little bit about their organization. We had a local Black-owned business come in to do the catering, so she got to talk more about her business, and then we served the community during our four shifts. So people were able to get that interaction no matter what time they were on for the line, hopefully what time zones. And now we're building global captains to be able to host those events during that time, because like no matter how hard we try, Asia and the US is going to be hard to get on the same call, you know. So then it's a little bit difficult. So we're building out our local global captains to be able to host, you know, events there. So when people are very busy, it's easy to kind of go along something that they're already doing, which might be eating. And then also during those town halls that we were talking about, having some exposure to some things that are a little bit more mandated, putting it alongside there. And just being cognizant of people's like time. So making that engagement a little bit shorter, maybe online, you know, working with the business, because you don't want to be seen like as a burden, and you want the barrier to entry to be really low. So just really kind of reading the room and seeing what will work best for the community that you're trying to reach.
Those are great points, especially I feel around like reducing friction, right? How do we make this super easy for people to engage, and also respect? You know, we know that we don't want you on a call at 7 p.m. at night. Like, we're going to give you options, other options for engaging. Stephanie, what about for you? What have you seen to be effective?
Yeah, I think the time and meeting people where they're at is huge. I also want to just chime in around ERG engagement specifically. I think if we're being honest, people join ERGs for different reasons. And so I think if you know why people join the ERG and you're crafting events based on those needs, people are going to show up if they want about, you know, if they want to learn about or be part of the events that you're putting together, if it's something that's the reason they joined. So when I was the leader of the ERG, I knew which one of my members had joined to just meet other Hispanic employees at the company. I knew which ones were super passionate around giving back to the community. I knew which ones joined for the professional development piece. I knew which ones joined for the networking piece. And so what I strategically did was every single quarter I planned an event based on those different needs and saw different people show up to those different events based on what they wanted to get out of the ERG. So I think that also helps. I love the different time schedules as well. Like, I always feel like we need to bring equity, like if it's available to everyone, you know, not just showing a recording to, you know, the West Coast employees because we've already had it on the East Coast every single time. So I think it really breaks it up and brings some like fostering of inclusion. If you haven't sent out like a survey to your ERG members, I definitely think that that's one of the biggest ones, is like, what are you interested? Like, why did you join this ERG? Kind of figuring out why, and then planning events around those whys. As I've moved over to an ERG program role, I also like to tell my ERG leaders that you do put in this work to plan these events, and then you don't see engagement, or you don't see the engagement that you want. You don't see the percentage of members attend those events, and that does not mean that you're doing anything wrong. I think it's really important to also know the business, right? Like, I know when my salespeople are trying to meet quota at the end of the quarter, when our quarter ends, or the end of the month. So planning events in the middle of the month or early in the month, so they can attend. And also just having that conversation with like meeting them where they are at. And I think that that's also really important as well when it comes to creating engagement and making sure that, you know, if you are an HR professional or a DI&B program manager on the call, I would say also have the opportunity to bring awareness to managers around the importance of employees attending these events. And let's be honest, like, if you don't see executives or managers attending events, you feel like, I'm not going to attend because it's not prioritized by leadership. So as HR practitioners and DI&B practitioners, we need to make sure that we're making a case. Like, if we're putting an event together, we need to make sure that we have managers and we have leadership showing up, because that's also going to increase engagement from employees and ICs that see their leaders attend events. So I think that that's also, from an HR DI&B program manager, our job to make sure that they're aware of events and we kind of nudge them to attend those events as well.
Stephanie, you just gave the best segue into the next section, which is really that getting engagement from your executives and also marketing through them. But before we move on to there, the chat has been blowing up with comments about how it is that we actually get that information about why it is that people want to join and want to participate in ERG events. And so maybe I may actually hold that until the end, and we can dive into that a little bit more deeply. But just to kind of recap some of the things that we heard here in terms of effective ways to build engagement. Like we said, craft programming based on what members want. We're going to dive into that more in the Q&A so that people can get really specific about their questions. Tapping those executive sponsors to encourage participation, using your existing channels, right? Your all hands, your newsletters, Teams and Slack. But also, and I really think this is possibly the most valuable, being really respectful of the time and the constraints on the schedules of the people you're trying to engage, right? Offering in-person, hybrid, virtual, regional options, offering asynchronous options for connecting, offering recordings if you can, but then also finally spotlighting your super members, right? Giving attention to the people who are putting a lot in order to, first of all, encourage them to keep doing that, and also show other people, hey, like, you know, you can be in the spotlight if you want, right? Like, this is a great way to improve your professional brand within the organization, or really get access to new opportunities. So we already clearly had this come up. Let's talk a little bit about marketing to and through executives. And I know this might be a little bit of a weird phrase, like to and through. What do we mean by this? What I mean is your executives are both an audience that you basically need to market to, right? Basically need to convince to care and invest their time in. But they're also a tool for you, right? They are a resource that you have that you can market through because they are influencers within your own company. So I'd love to hear from each of you kind of what your experiences are, any recommendations or tactics when it comes to engaging these executives. Ashley, do you want to kick off on this one?
Yeah, so the biggest trying to see, do we want to bring in some Instagram stuff here too? Like, because so I'll say this for folks who are in tech and who have a lot of communication channels, we have a lot less than I did when I was at Instagram, because we used basically our Meta platform, which had, you know, basically your internal Facebook. So like, we encouraged our leaders to post there, to host conversations, to really engage on their own, and to share their journey, both to go along their own DEI journey and to share what they've been learning along the way, so that they were really, you know, incentivized to do that. One, because we were doing a lot of work on equity and diversity at the company, and two, we were going through a lot of racial justice movements on our platform. So being able to help them show that their leadership and how them being a leader in this space will cascade down to other members was very important. Same conversation is happening here. We just sent or went through our executive leadership team members through our DEI roadmap, kind of our 4-year outlook of what we want DEI to look like at Lamb Weston. And then we had a whole slide on, this is our asks of you to help this come to life. And one of them was to engage and remove the roadblocks for people joining at events, and even to sponsor them. Sponsoring them means like, you come to one, like there's probably one that you really care about, you come to one, you give the opening remarks, you reshare the invite, you do stuff, like you give permission for people to come. Now, of course, we're in the down period, so we haven't had that, but when we're going through that roadmap, they're like, oh, this is great, how can we help? So like, once you kind of sold them, like we were selling them on the story of DEI, what we want to do at the company, they were jazzed about that. Like, what can we do? And I'm like, we will call upon you. Like, we will give you the way. So like, being very clear with them and giving them instructions on what to do and kind of giving them opportunities to join in really helps. They'll also go through our inclusive leadership training that we have, again, just to like, again, help them with the language, get them more involved, get them more knowledgeable, because one of the biggest things for them is like, they're afraid of doing something wrong, saying something incorrectly, and so then they disengage. So we want to give them opportunities that's like, that's welcoming for them to engage in community.
Those are great points. Thank you. And Stephanie, what about you? Anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I've been very fortunate to have executives that are all in when it comes to DEI and ERGs. But when you know, if we've ever had someone that we have had to make a case to, I definitely think data is the way to go. You know, communicating success stories of other companies. You constantly you see articles around ERGs at big, huge companies looking into the data. You know, I think last time I checked, like McKinsey & Company released an article that said 90% of Fortune 500 companies have ERGs. So even if you are a startup, right, if you are just getting started, if you are a smaller company, it's really important to kind of get get that started, because if you eventually want to be a Fortune 500 company, like 90% of them have ERGs. It improves diversity, it fosters inclusion, it promotes internal impact, you know, even external impact. Ashley touched a little bit about giving back to the community and some of those volunteer opportunities and really leading with ERGs to do that. I think once you have that case built, I think it's really important to let executives in. You know, I think one of the best things that I have been able to do is allow them to listen to the impact that they have with the ERGs within their employees. During Hispanic Heritage Month, I led our first ever Hispanic symposium at HighSpot, and I had a conversation with all of the Hispanic ERG members, and we spent a full day together. And towards the end, I had a heart-to-heart with them and let them know, hey, I really loved this. I think it's really important. I also think it's really important for leaders who helped fund this, who gave us budget to put this together, who are really helping us push this forward, to listen to the impact that they are having. So I let executives towards the end of the day come in, of course, with the permission of my ERG members, and talk about what was more impactful for them. And tears were shed. And I think it was really enlightful for the exec sponsors that helped the event happen and fund the event, to listen to the impact that, like, it was having on employees, how they built a community, how they felt like they actually truly belonged after being here for years, how they felt seen and heard, and they were, you know, saying things that I don't think they had even told family members. And so I think once you have that executive support, it's really important to let them in and listen. And so for our Bold Summit that we just had this week, we're putting a spoken story together, and we're sharing that with executives. We're sharing that with the company around, this is why we're going to continue to have this event every single year, because this is the impact that it's having on employees. Employees feel like they belong. And, you know, the data shows that if you feel like you belong and you foster the inclusion, you're more likely to stay at a company. And so obviously we want to, we want those retention. We want to keep the great talent that we have. And I think one of the things is making sure that we're letting them know how employees feel and how important ERGs are to them.
I love those points, Stephanie, because it really pairs two things, right? It's, you know, we make decisions with our head and also with our heart. And so it's really great to have the data and say, this is what the best performing companies do in terms of their ERGs. And also, here's how much it matters to our employees specifically here. Here are their stories. So I love that you've been able to do that. So a couple quick things just to recap. Those success stories, right? Share the success stories from your own company, share data from other companies. I think one other thing also, if you have the chance to create a formalized executive sponsor role at the company, right? Because it really helps to be able to have a structure for executives to participate through. And to that end, we found it is also really helpful to onboard your executive sponsors, outline what their role is, what ways they can support you, what your expectations are, what a meeting cadence is. And again, I'm going to call out Chezzy here. They've got great resources on this. One thing that I'll recommend, a personal recommendation on the comms side, provide brief talking points for your executive sponsors. Couple of bullets about what your ERG is, why it exists, and some of the key successes or key success stories. And this goes a little bit back to Ashley's point on making sure people feel comfortable with the language that they're using. Just helping them own that message and giving them a really simple resource can be very, very helpful. It's a great hack. And then finally, of course, involve your executive sponsors in promoting these memberships, these events, and in promoting membership in general. So, I mean, we've just gone way into a lot of different areas. And I know that the chat has been really, really active with a lot of different questions. And also I love how people in the chat are also giving suggestions and sharing their own practices. So we've got a little bit less than 10 minutes. And I still want to hold a minute or two at the end just to share some more resources. But does anybody have any questions that they want to bring to the table? You're welcome to unmute yourself, or you can type it into the chat and we'll read it out from here.
Hey,
All right,
feel
so
free to drop stuff in the chat. There was an earlier question around defining ERG membership. So I guess for Stephanie and Ashley, how do you all define ERG membership, knowing that it might not just be people who identify with a particular affinity, it might be allies trying to join. So what is your take on membership?
Yeah, I can take, oh, go ahead, Ashley.
Got it, Stephanie.
Yeah, I think at HighSpot specifically, we do separate the two with allies and members. So when you see any ERG logo or like slogan, we always say bold members and allies. We do differentiate. We have different tiers based on audiences. So I do think, and I'm 100% advocate, that there needs to be space and time and events for just community members to meet together. And so we divide them in tiers. So sometimes my Happy or API ERG will plan events where it's just folks that are part of the community that identify as API. Sometimes they have events where they open it up to allies and they invite allies. And then obviously our third tier event is company wide. And so that's anyone that participates regardless of ERG leader status. And so that's kind of how we've identified them. I know at my previous company, if you were a member, you were a member, regardless if you were an ally or part of the group. So it's a little bit different there. Budget just made like how many people were part of the ERG, but at HighSpot, we do it a little bit different, and I like it this way a little bit better because I have been at companies where allies with good intention will attend events that the community puts together and sometimes overtake them. And so I do think that I like the members and allies, and so just differentiating based on programming.
Yeah, yeah. I know that at Instagram it was separated like that. We had our own, like we had two, one like a group, like our internal group that just had identifying members, and then one group that was members and allies. And we had a group chat that was just identifying members, where we got to talk in community with each other to then be able to elevate issues that are happening to our executives, and then be able to communicate or create programming to folks. Now, here is a lot different and a bit harder. Here being at Lamb Weston is all together because we're in a different spot in our DI journey at the company. Like at this point, the biggest need for the members were for others to see them, to understand them, their humanity. So there's a lot of ally work that needs to be done, which is a big charter of the BRG. So it's really mixed right now. And then maybe we'll get to the point when we have more representation within the company, because for some groups, there'll be like 7 members, so, and maybe that's cute, that's intimate, but for this, where it's very much so ally based being in there. And then the difference between that being a member and then not being a member of that BRG, there might be member only events like a book club or something that has like a smaller capacity that will just be members only, and then some events that'll be for everyone. So that's kind of the difference there.
Great, thank you. And we just had a question come into the chat from Melissa. When you're just starting up ERGs at the company, do you have separate ERG leadership teams versus all the other members, or do you just kind of lean into all members helping with programming?
Mm-hmm. We have separate teams, and then those teams will ask for committee members from the members to help put on events. So we have a chair and a vice chair. We have a mentor for them. So that's kind of a senior leader, not yet VP, who helps the leads lead their leadership team. Then you have a broader leadership team. They may be organized in different pillars like awareness, education, mentorship. They'll have things, and they'll send out like a survey or a sign up for members of the group to help put on events for that pillar. So that's kind of how that works for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Stephanie,
Same
how does
here.
it work for you?
Yeah, same here. We have always had ERG leadership. I think when it comes to helping with programming, it honestly depends on the company. When I was at Zillow, we had, co-leaders, and then you had a recruiting lead, you had a communications lead, you had a philanthropy lead. And that really helps when you're more of an established company that has a recruiting team, a philanthropy team, a team dedicated to comms. We're a startup. We don't have a lot of those teams solidified just yet. And so a lot of the things that work for us and that we're starting to see, and again, it's definitely changing, is that we have 2 co-leaders and they have a committee of subcommittee facilitators or leaders that help with planning, regardless of what the type of planning it is. Maybe it's a professional development, maybe it's a belonging event, or maybe it's a philanthropic event. It doesn't matter. They all chime in and help, so they don't have specific positions that they are tied to. And I think this ends up working a little bit well, because as the business ebbs and flows, you will have people that are maybe extremely busy towards the beginning of the year and at the end of the year, but there's maybe have some time in the middle of the year, and then other teams that are opposite. So it's kind of like you pick and choose who's available and open to helping facilitate that.
Got it. Thank you. Final question that we've got time for, just real fast. How do you encourage members to actually fill in surveys and give feedback?
Yeah, so there are some, reminders, telling them why it's important. Like in the email that we're talking about their surveys, like, hey, we want to put on programming that's applicable and relevant to you. Fill out this survey, and so we'll usually get some hits there. I did see a chat saying, like, what happens when nobody fills one out? Your company may run some sort of engagement survey as well that folks have taken. You could take insights from that engagement survey, looking at what's important to that community, and kind of have some starter events around there. Leadership development, learning and development tends to be something that's high on the list. So even if your ERG is putting on an event to help people that may not really seem to be a part of the group, like our young professionals group put on an event about resume building and mobility within the company. It's not necessary. I mean, that's something that everybody, wants to participate in. And we know that that's something that people are interested in. So they were able to get folks to engage at that event because they knew at a higher level that was important to folks at the company.
Got it. Thank you so much. And on a broad level, Stephanie, Ashley, thank you both so much for taking the time to share your kind of on the ground expertise with us. I thought this was a really useful conversation. I hope everyone on the line thought this was a useful conversation. I'm guessing from the chat, folks did. So to that end, just in terms of what comes next, first, get your ERG marketing plan template. We're going to send it out after the call. I also put a link to it in the email. Also, if you want, we're giving away a free gift. Basically, anyone on this call is able to create a free video for their ERG or for their DE&I program using Spoken. You can truly just ping me on my email. I'll set you up with a free account. They'll be at the premium level, so you get all the fancy features. You can also find us at getspoken.com. And then finally, please connect with all of us on LinkedIn. If you've got follow-up questions, there have been some great ones in the chat. All of our LinkedIn addresses are here. And thank you all for your time. And thank you so much, Chezzy, for hosting.
Of course. Thanks, everyone. I will send out the recording, and some additional templates shortly. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. All right. Bye.
Take care, everybody.
So.